In this video, I'm gonna show you how you can use AI to go from a single text prompt to a fully modeled, fully rigged 3D character, which is ready to be used for your games or 3D animations. If you're someone who's struggling with 3D modeling, texturing, rigging, or animation, then this video is just for you. I will walk you through my entire workflow, how I created and animated this character using various AI tools that are available online. I do want to mention though that this process works best for low poly 3D characters, and the steps outlined in this walkthrough might vary slightly depending on what kind of character you're going for and what outputs the AI will give you. But basically the process should be fairly similar to any character that you're creating. And I also want to add that one of the tools that we'll be using is not a free tool. But don't worry, I will show you an alternative approach that you can use for free to achieve similar results. So with that said, let's dive into it. One of my favorite cartoons growing up in the early 2000s was a show called Johnny Bravo. And so I thought it would be fun to create a character that is similar to Johnny Bravo. Sort of like an exaggerated bodybuilder with sunglasses. So the first tool we will be using for this process is called Genie. It was created by Luma Labs, and it basically spits out a 3D model based on a text prompt. Kind of like DALL-E or Midjourney, but for 3D models. So let's type our prompt and see what we get. Okay, this is pretty cool. It gives us 4 different versions we can choose. And by looking at the models, I would say I would most likely want to go with this guy. This one seems most similar to Johnny Bravo. He even has the sunglasses and everything. Looks pretty cool. Now, I played around with this tool before, and I can tell you that although the model looks fine from a distance, it has very poor detail and the composition is also very asymmetrical. So for the best results, I would recommend making a high-res version of it. Now this does take some time, but we get a much better result in the end. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Oh Jesus, what the heck is that face? It looks like the xenomorph from Alien and Johnny Bravo had a baby. A jacked up baby. Oh God. Okay, all you 3D artists out there, don't worry, this is proof that AI will most likely not take your jobs away anytime soon. Alright, so clearly we can see that Genie is not perfect. It still produces very inaccurate results when it comes to textures and overall detail. But the model does have a good topology. So we're going to be using this model as our basis and go from there. So let's download the model so we can edit it in Blender. I would recommend using low for the retopologize option, as this will give us less noise. And then the last thing we do is choose the blend format and click download. Now that we have our model opened up in Blender, the first thing we're going to do is take reference images of the front, side, and back views. Go to the viewport shading on the top right corner and click on the material preview mode. This now lets us see the model with textures on it. To go to the front view, we need to press 1. 1 usually brings you to the front view, and if you press 3, that brings you to the side view. If you're on Mac and pressing the number keys doesn't work, make sure to go to the Preferences and open up the input panel. In there, you want to make sure that the Emulate keypad option is turned on. So back to the model view, in our case, we see that the front and side views are reversed, and that is not what we want. So to turn our model to face the correct direction, we can type R followed by Z followed by -90, and this will rotate the model in the right direction. Now that we have our views lined up correctly, let's go to the viewport overlays option on the top right corner, and we want to toggle off grid, 3D cursor, bones, and origins for now. This will leave us with a clean front view image of the model with no markers or indicators visible. Next, let's take a screenshot of our model with Command-Shift-4 if you're on Mac, or using the snipping tool or something equivalent if you're on Windows. Also make sure that the model is zoomed out and small, because we don't want a too detailed image of it. Then press 3 to go to the side view and do the same thing. Lastly, press Command 1 and this will toggle the back view instead of the front view. And here let's take a screenshot of the back as well. Now that we have all our reference images ready, let's generate some textures with the help of AI. The second AI tool we will be using is called Magnific AI. It's a tool that is mainly used for upscaling low-res images, but it does a lot more than that. If you have an image that is very abstract or hard to understand, Magnific AI will actually invent new details about the image. So it can basically create custom, stunning, high-resolution artwork. Maybe you saw the viral image of Lara Croft and what she looked like when upscaled from a PlayStation 1 resolution image. Basically, we can do something similar with the screenshots of our genie model here. We can generate better resolution images of the model that we will later use as textures. Unfortunately, Magnific AI does not have a free tier available, so in order to do this, you will need to buy the monthly subscription for the service. If you want to see the alternative free approach I mentioned earlier, then just jump to the next chapter of this video. Okay, so now here we just uploaded our little image of our bodybuilder. The parameters I used in this case was scale factor as 4x, optimized for video game assets, and for the prompt I used a bodybuilder similar to Johnny Bravo, cartoon style, front view, and then after a column you just specify the weight. So I wrote big hand knuckles with a weight of 1.2, blonde hairstyle with a weight of 1.4 because I really want to emphasize the blonde hair, and flat shadows so we get an image that is not very contrasty. I don't know if this actually works, I just put it there just in case. And feel free to reuse my parameters, but if you're using this tool you can just play around with it and see what works best for you. But for me, creativity I cranked up to 6, HDR was -3, resemblance -4 because I really don't want to have that alien face on that character, and fractality -2. And the engine we can keep as automatic, and then we just press upscale and let the upscaler do its thing. And so this was our bodybuilder before with the creepy alien face. And now, after Magnific AI did its job, look at how clean this image looks. I mean, the bodybuilder doesn't have the sunglasses, but it's pretty good looking. It's almost like a ready-to-go texture that we can stamp on our model once we'll be done with all the tweaking. So for the back, we're seeing similar results. We do see that it did generate 2 hands. The hand has more fingers than it should have. I mean, these inconsistencies, these will always be there. It's not going to be a perfect texture, but at least it's a base that we can use and then later refine as we want. And the side view was actually the most difficult because for some reason it couldn't understand that there should be 1 hand. Again, we're seeing another hand popping up somewhere from the bottom. And also I don't know why it needed to add a second hand on the chest. So we might have some issues with the side view. If you want to have it perfect, you will have to refine the texture painting a bit. So as I mentioned before, there's another free alternative tool that can give you similar results to Magnific AI, but it has its cons. So the tool I'm talking about is Krea or Krea.ai or Krea.ai. I'm not sure. And in this tool we can do the same thing. We upload our image, give a descriptive prompt, and it will give us a similar image based on the parameters. So once again, let's upload our reference image with our bodybuilder. Let's scale it up a bit. Actually, let's scale it a lot. As you can see, instantly it gives us something slightly similar, lower quality, but very good nonetheless. We can also copy the same prompt, put it in here, and it will try to give us a Johnny Bravo, I guess. And the thing you want to tweak here is the AI strength, and I would recommend lowering it as much as you can to still keep that integrity intact. Actually, you know what? Some of the details are actually better than Magnific AI. It got the hands right. And the reason why I suggest decreasing the AI strength as much as possible is because we want to have the pose as close to the reference image as possible, because you will have to stamp that image in the front view later when we will be doing the texturing. And as you can see, if I increase the AI strength, it deviates from that front view a lot. So decrease it as much as you can, still keeping the original pose if you can. So the first drawback is that unlike Magnific AI, this tool does not maintain the same orthographic pose as the reference image. And this might cause some difficulties when you're texturing, but from what I can see here, it's actually not that bad. The face is still not refined, but it does a pretty good job. And secondly, the images of this tool do not have a very high resolution, and generating these high resolution images will cost you compute time, which you only have 3 minutes on the free version. But this is still a viable option nonetheless. Actually, you know what? I will try to quickly enhance it, and look at that. It's actually a pretty handsome dude. I would say it still does a pretty decent job, but it's not as detailed as we want. We could probably increase the size if we wanted to, but then again, that costs us compute time. I mean, the final result will really depend on how well you use these images for texturing, which we will do later. So no matter which one of these tools you use, you can get very good results. Now that we have our reference images for our textures, we can hop back into Blender and start refining our model. Back in Blender, let's first toggle back all the helpful viewport overlays we might need: the grid, the 3D cursor, and the origins. By looking at the center of the axis, we can see that the model is not perfectly centered. Let's fix that real quick. Click on the model and choose the Move tool from the left-hand side tool panel. If we zoom in a bit on the crotch area, we can see that the blue line is not perfectly centered. So let's move our model a bit to the right. Now that we have it centered, it's a good idea to center the origin as well. Click on the model, go to Object, set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor, and this will reset the origin back to the center. Now we have a perfectly centered model and we can start refining it. If we click on the wireframe shading on the top right, we can see that the model has a high poly count. We want to decrease the poly count so it would be easier to refine the model. So go to the Modifier tab and search for a modifier called Decimate. Toggle the Unsubdivide tab, and here let's change the iteration count to 2. I find 2 is a pretty good value that decreases the poly count without sacrificing the overall structure of the model. Next, we are going to permanently apply this modifier to our model. So click on the arrow next to the modifier and choose Apply. Now we have a lower poly version of our model, and the next thing we want to do is make it symmetrical for easier modeling. So click on the model and choose Edit Mode from the top left corner. Make sure that the X-ray option is toggled on. We are now going to cut our model completely in half. So go to the mesh and choose the option Bisect. Choose a point on the Z-axis as close to the middle as possible and then drag the line all the way down. This cuts all the center faces in half. Next, go to the face selection mode, and it's very important that you still have that X-ray option toggled on, and now try to select all the faces on the right side of the model with the Select Box tool. We are now going to delete all those faces, so press X and choose the Faces option to delete them all. After doing so, we want to make sure that we have deleted all the faces on the right side. So let's zoom in and see if we have missed any. If you see some faces still sticking out, select them by clicking the middle point of the face and delete them by pressing X again. Repeat this process until you see no other faces sticking out. Once you're done with that, select all the remaining faces by typing A and move them as close to the Z-axis center line as possible. Go back to the object mode and let's go to the modifiers panel again. This time search for a modifier called Mirror. Toggle off the X-axis and toggle on the Z-axis. This will mirror our object on the right side. Also be sure to turn on clipping and increase the merge distance a bit. 0.002 meters will suffice in this case. This will make sure that the points close to the center of the Z-axis stick together automatically. And we are done refining our model. We now have a somewhat cleaner low poly structure than before. If we toggle the material preview mode back on, we can see that the texture is totally messed up, but don't worry, we will fix that in a moment. Now, another thing that I really don't like about this model is that it has like big chunks as hands. They look good now, but if we want to have like a really refined model that has actual hands, we might want to do something about this. Now, this step is completely optional, but if you decide that you want your model to actually have hands with fingers, one thing we can do is hop back to Genie, and if we just type in a hand and create, we will instantly get 4 versions of a very nice low poly hand. Some of them are kind of weird looking, but I do like this one. This one seems like a normal hand. I'm not gonna make a high-res version right now, I'm just gonna choose retopologize as low and download it as a blend model. And if we open it in Blender, if we toggle the wireframe, we can see that's too many polys for my liking. But once again, we can go to the modifier, do the same thing, choose decimate, and then maybe increase it to 3 iterations, or maybe even 4. Let's see how that looks. Okay, 4. That really looks like a nice low poly hand. You might want to go in edit mode and just tweak those fingers to look better, but for the sake of this tutorial, let's just use this hand. You can then select the hand model, export it in FBX format, and then import it in your main character file. Before doing that, we want to first select all the polygons of the fist. We can use the lasso tool to select all of them, and then refine our selection by going around it. Once you delete them, you will see that the same thing is mirrored on the right side. So now we have a model without hands. Once you import the hand, we want to rotate it and position it as close to the wrist of the original model as possible. I also noticed that my hand model was that of the right side, but I want to place it on the left side. So what I did was basically flip the model by typing S for scale, followed by X and -1. This will flip the hand completely. Keep in mind that doing that might invert your normals of the model, but don't worry about that just now, we can fix that later. So then position the hand as close to the wrist as possible. And if you choose the edge tool and then click on the edge while holding Command, it will select the whole edge loop. You can then resize the edge loop to better fit the wrist size of the hand. And then you can hide the model by pressing H and start deleting the top faces of the hand object. Once you're done with that, it's now time to add the hand to the character object. So select the hand model first, hold down Shift and then select the character model. Go to the object menu and click join. The hand is now added to the main character object. You can see how it is mirrored on the right side. The last thing left to do is connect all the faces of the wrist together to form a uniform arm. Now this process is a bit time consuming, so I'll just fast forward through it. But essentially there are several methods on how to connect 2 meshes together. You can choose 2 vertices and choose the merge vertices option, and this will merge those 2 points together. If you see 2 edges that can be connected together, you can choose the Bridge Edge Loops option to bridge them together. Or better yet, if you have an open hole that consists of 4 edges, that can be sealed with an extra face by selecting all the edges and choosing Grid Fill from the face selection menu. Do this for the rest of the wrist until the hand is perfectly connected to the rest of the body. Last, we want to check if the normals are pointing in the right direction. Since I inverted the hand model, I know those normals are not facing the right way. We can see this by toggling on face orientation in the viewport overlays panel, and all the faces that have normals facing in the wrong direction are colored in red. To fix this, we need to select all the faces in the edit mode, go to the mesh menu, select normals, and then recalculate outside. If all the faces are colored in blue, that means everything is correct. Our model is almost ready to be textured. The last part we need to do is UV unwrap it. Basically, it's just taking the surface of the model and laying it out on a flat plane so you can add color to it. To do that, we need to create seams. Seams help us separate different pieces of the object for easier texturing. We can make seams in Blender by just selecting a bunch of edges and then choosing the option Mark Seam. Choosing the right seams takes practice. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, but for characters like these, it's usually a good idea to mark a seam around the neck and then go up the back of the neck a few edges. Next, you want to mark a seam around the shoulder to separate the arm, and another one around the wrist to separate the hand from the arm. It's always a good idea to mark a seam around the waistline to separate the legs. And I also like making a center seam, going up the torso and up the back of the body. Next, add another seam around the ankle to separate the feet, and then also a seam near the sole of the shoe. The more seams you add, the more granular the mesh pieces become, and therefore it is easier to texture them later on. But you have to mark them strategically. I also like to mark another seam up the inner side of the leg going up to the crotch to separate the front and back position of the legs. Lastly, I like to add a seam around the palm of the hand as well. This helps separate the top from the bottom of the hand for easier texturing. Now that we have marked all the seams, let's go back to the layout view and toggle the material properties tab with our model selected. We see two materials in the list here. Click the minus button to delete both of them, and then click the new button to create a new material. We can rename this material to something else like bodybuilder text, for example. Then click the dot next to the base color slot and choose image texture. Then click the new button to create a new texture. We can leave all the properties as is. You might want to change the title from untitled to something else. I forgot to do that. And the last thing we want to do is open the specular dropdown and lower the IOR level to 0. This will prevent our texture to appear shiny or glossy. We should now see a character that is completely black, and this is exactly what we want. Now is a good time to make a backup of this model, because if we make some mistakes later on, we can still go back to our backup model. The reason why I do this is because at the moment it is time for us to permanently apply the mirror modifier on the object. This means that from now on, we will not be able to make symmetrical changes to the model's topology, but this will allow us to texture it better. Now let's go back to the UV editing panel and select all the faces in edit mode. Then we want to choose UV unwrap faces and click unwrap. At this point we have successfully unwrapped all our faces and laid them out on a texture plane. If you select a single face now and press L on your keyboard, it will select the entire region that is constrained by the seams we marked earlier. This way you can select different parts of the mesh and see where their faces are laid out on the texture plane. If you select the island selection mode on the left side of the UV panel, you can also choose different parts of the UV mesh and reposition them on the plane as you like. So we are now finally ready to texture our model. Now let's switch to the texture paint mode. First, press 1 on the right side panel to go to our front view. In this texture paint mode, pay attention to the left side panel. You should see a little arrow on the top right corner. Drag it to the left side to expand this panel. Here you will find texturing brushes. We will create a new custom brush, so click on the Add Brush button to create a new one. You can give it a unique name if you want. I will just call it Texture Brush for now. Now go to the Texture tab and expand it, and then click New to create a new texture. This is not a texture we will use for our models, it's just a reference image for our texture brush. If you go to the Texture tab on the right, it should be pre-selected by default. Click Open and locate the front view image we created earlier using Magnific AI. Next, go to the Mapping option and choose Stencil. On the right side panel, you should now see our image popping up at the bottom left corner. You can now move and transform this image. By right-clicking and holding down Shift, we can scale the image up or down, and we can simply move it by holding down the right click. And we can also rotate it by right-clicking and holding down Command or Control on Windows. Let me just set the rotation back to 0. And now we should try our best to position our reference image to match our model on the front view. We might not get it perfect, especially with the hand portion, because I altered the model a little bit, but nonetheless, anything close to the original pose will be good enough. Once we've positioned our image, we can start drawing over it, and this will basically spray paint the image onto our model. If we now go to the perspective mode, we can see that most of the front view is already looking pretty good. We can also see that on the texture plane on the left side, some of our body parts have already been filled in. The black color also helps us keep track of areas that are not textured yet. So now we can press Command 1 to go to the back view. Now go to your stencil texture and change the source image to the back view that we generated earlier. And here we can do the same process. We reposition the stencil to line it up with the back view pose and paint over it. Look at that, our model is already looking very, very good. Lastly, let's try to do the same process on the side. We had some problems earlier with the side image, so in this case I'm just going to use the side view image to fill in the blanks that have not been textured yet. For example, the ear and the missing hairline is a nice addition that the side view image gives us. And we can also get a nice texture on top of the hand. For the rest of the hand, you might need to find another reference image online or generate it on your own. There are a few other handful tools that can help us in this process. With the clone tool, for example, you can command click on an area and it will try to extend or clone that segment, similarly to how Photoshop does it. Another great tool is the smear tool, which can smear together several parts of the texture, allowing you to create a more seamless blend between them. And lastly, if you want to get rid of some harsh inconsistencies in your texture, you can always soften those pixels with the soften tool. The combination of these three should give you a great set of tools for good texture painting. If you find that some areas are still difficult to texture correctly, you can always save your texture and then open it up on an external software like Photoshop to further refine it. So it's already looking pretty good, but there are still some small detail areas that still need to be refined. I'm not going to do the whole texture in this video. My goal with this demonstration was to give you a rough idea how to do it, but I will leave it up to you to perfect it on your own character. Texturing will probably be the part of this process that will take the most time and effort to get it right, but this method with AI generated images, in my opinion, is still 100 times faster than having to paint a custom texture from scratch. Not to mention you have to have an insane amount of texture painting skill to produce a truly good looking character. So the only thing missing from this character are the sunglasses, and as before we can either hop back to Genie and generate them with AI, but as I checked, those AI glasses didn't have like very defined shapes, so we can also model them ourselves. I actually found this 1-minute short by a channel called Blender Vitals, which is an excellent tutorial on how to easily create a pair of sunglasses in just a few minutes. I'll make sure to add a link to that tutorial in the video description below. Now that we have our character fully modeled and textured, the only thing left is animation. And for this process, we can use the good old animation tool called Mixamo. We can export our model in FBX format and upload it to Mixamo. And Mixamo has this awesome auto rigging tool that lets us create a full body rig in just a few clicks. Once that's done, we can choose one of the animations from their animation library, apply it to our model, and click download, and that's it. We can now open up Blender, start a new project, and import our downloaded animation. And as you can see here, our model is fully rigged, animated, and ready to use. From this point on, it's up to you what you do with your character. You can use it for 3D animations, you can use it for games, whatever you like. And as for the Johnny Bravo bodybuilder character we just created, I actually went ahead and turned it into a reusable 3D game character in Unity. If you want to download this asset and use it in your own projects, just click the link in the description below. So that's it, that is my whole workflow, how to create 3D characters with the assistance of various AI tools. If you happen to use this workflow to create your own characters, I would love to see what you come up with. So if you do, please send me some screenshots of your creations. You can tag me or message me on Instagram, Threads, or X. Look me up. My handle is @Andres_who. If you really want to support my creative endeavors, then the most generous thing you can do is buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/AndresGorax. If you decide to do so, thank you so much in advance. If you found this tutorial useful, make sure to click that thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And now, go out there and make some freaking awesome 3D characters yourself. I will see you in the next videos. Take care, folks.